Which Warframe is better? The age-old question. To be honest, if it was a determined factor, then it would be a straightforward answer. But that's not always the case. I usually get people coming over asking these questions when I stream Warframe on twitch.tv/nightmareframe with a 3 because someone else took the name. Small self-plug there. But they usually come in asking an open-ended question, like Mesa or Garuda? Like, what am I supposed to do with that? This is why when you ask questions, be sure to be Pacific like the ocean. In this case, they want to know which Warframe is better so they don't waste their resources. This is a common theme amongst a lot of new/casual players. And I can't give you a straightforward answer because, for one, I don't know what kind of playstyle suits you, how much resources you have, or how much are you looking to invest in one unit, or are you looking to just level up a random Warframe and you have the funds to get one or the other.
I can't just tell you to pick a Warframe and play it because then you might not like that Warframe. So usually you gotta have a one-to-one with the person, see what they're really into before you can recommend them something.
You see, so much to interpret with such a question. However, in this video, we are going to take a look at two frames that share somewhat of a similar role, and who could be beneficial for your time and what you'd want to invest in. The two frames in question are Revenant and Rhino. As Warframes, they're quite different from one another, but when you break them down, they kind of function the same. Kind of. Both kits have their pros and cons, but if you want a TLDR answer of what they fundamentally do, then pretty much if you want to buff your weapons to do giga damage while having some decent survivability, then Rhino is your pick. If you want the epitome of immortality, turning off your brain and not dying, while also having an army of mind-controlled minions, then Revenant is your guy. Then you have some people looking for more. Can the frame do level cap? Listen, buddy, any frame can do level cap. It's whether who can be more brain dead to use in that scenario. If that's your determining factor on how easy it is to do level cap, then Revenant would be your pick. Now, both frames have some supportive capabilities, one more defensive than the other, but let's go over their kits, breaking them down to see what Warframe you would pick as your first choice between the two. And if you like the idea of this type of video, be sure to comment down below, tell me your thoughts, because I'm planning to make it into a series, and what two frames you would like to see next. Rhino is an older frame, so his kit is quite simple. It does what it says, and lacks complexity and depth. While Revenant did come way after Rhino, so his kit has a more synergistic approach to the abilities, as certain interactions tie into one another. Rhino's first ability is Charge. It's a mobility and crowd control tool. It has a short burst of movement and wind-up, pretty much a worse version of Mach Rush. It does have a combo mechanic similar to Landslide, but the damage is so mediocre it's not even worth using for damage, but only for mobility and knocking enemies back. It does have an augment which gives him an Iron Skin multiplier, but it's such a hassle to set up and not worth it most of the time. And this is the ability you would usually replace for a helmet. Revenant's first ability is Enthrall. It corrupts an enemy's mind and turns them against their own. Enthrall targets can spread the affliction if they engage with other enemies. This ability synergizes with the rest of the kit, where they take more damage from the third and fourth ability, regenerate his second ability, and enemies stunned by his second ability give him a free cast of Enthrall. And enthralled enemies that die leave behind a geyser that deals damage over time. Now, comparing the two first abilities, you can see Revenant has a lot more going on for it. Now onto the second ability. This is where people compare the two Warframes. I mean, sure, but really? Rhino's second ability is Iron Skin. Activate it to become invulnerable for 3 seconds and absorb all incoming damage and turn it into Overguard. The ability has its own multiplier that scales with strength and armor to give him a base overguard, but it also scales with damage absorbed from enemy attacks. Here's the kicker. You cannot recast his ability. You need an augment to recast the ability, while other frames can recast their defensive ability right off the bat. For those who don't know, Overguard is an additional layer of health applied over your shields. It gives you complete status immunity and damage negation. Here's the kicker with his Overguard application. It's actually the worst type of Overguard, because it is the only Overguard in the game that is an active ability. Now, what does that mean? Well, it's the only Overguard that can be dispelled when you fall off the map or nullified, while frames like Dante, Kullervo, Frost, and Stynex can chill with their Overguard regardless. Yep, that's Iron Skin. Now onto Revenant Mesmer Skin, the Immortal button. Unlike Iron Skin, this isn't Overguard, but a set of charges. Think of them like extra lives that scale with strength. Enemies that hit you will consume a charge, and you go invulnerable for a brief moment. Enemies that hit you are also stunned, and give you a free cast on his Enthrall on those stunned targets. Not only does it stun enemies, but it also reflects some damage. So Mesmer Skin already does a lot more than Iron Skin. You can replenish your Mesmer Skin if you kill enthralled enemies with your third ability, or by simply recasting Mesmer Skin. Now, recasting Mesmer Skin does remove all stacks and leave you vulnerable for the initial animation. And to protect you from damage, you either use Rolling Guard before casting or just have a lot of casting speed. And Mesmer Skin has an augment that allows you to share a small portion of Mesmer Skin to allies while also granting you more charges. Now on to Roar, Rhino's third ability. His best ability. That's also a Helminth ability that anyone can have, like Revenant with Roar. And this is also how people are comparing the two. Roar is essentially weakened in its Helminth form, but still a strong buff. So how does Roar work? Now imagine these mods, but on crack, and not limited to any faction. They work on any enemy. Unfortunately, not constructs. And not only does it boost weapon damage and have DOTs deal 2 times the damage, it also affects abilities. Literally one of, if not the best damage buffs in the game. Revenant's Reave, just like Roar, is a Helminth ability. It is a movement ability that turns you into a mist, going through enemies, to deal damage and replenish health and shields. The distance traveled scales with duration, and when it comes to damage, it deals percentage health damage to enemies. So if you debuff enemies with viral, you can one-shot them. However, if enemies are enthralled, they do take a lot of damage from Reave. So you usually want to aim for 250% strength to hit the 100th percentile health damage on Reave to one-shot enemies. This ability also restores Mesmer Skin charges if you kill enthralled targets. And Reave is also a way better movement tool than Charge, because it also scales with other movement speed multipliers. So you can propel yourself really far and really fast. Now coming to the fourth ability, where it becomes a massive hit or a miss, depending how you're playing the frame. Rhino's Stomp literally stomps the ground and suspends enemies midair. Really good crowd control, and that's literally it. If you use the augment Reinforced Stomp, you can replenish Iron Skin charges. It does damage, but not enough to kill anything in Steel Path. I feel most of the augments for Rhino are band-aid fixes for mechanics that could have been inherently implemented to the kits to give it more depth and synergy. Granted, he is an older frame, but at least update these frames. Come on. Revenant's fourth ability is not that great either. It turns you into a disco ball that shoots out sentient beams that deal adaptive damage. Adaptive damage in this case meaning damage that has no attribute and adapts to the enemy's defensive weaknesses. So if they have armor, it will deal corrosive damage and proc corrosive. On paper, this is really good. Unfortunately, not in practice, because you do lose control of your Warframe and are forced to stay in the spinning animation state. You cannot use your first and second abilities. You cannot jump, dodge, or any important movement tool. Although you can use Reave to propel yourself forward. Now you see the differences between these two frames, and the super minor similarities that people use to compare the two. Whether you're looking for depth or more interesting build synergies, these two are not really for you. The two frames are quite one-dimensional. Be tanky, and of course, buff yourself and teammates with inherent buffs or Helminth. The best all-rounder setup for Rhino right now is slapping on Nourish on his first ability and calling it a day. He can support his team and himself. Revenant can also slap on Nourish or Roar on his fourth ability and calls it a day himself. If you want something slightly different, he slaps on Zata's Whisper instead. And the homie Asian Invasions did a funny fourth ability build on Revenant where he replaces Reave for Pillage to support himself and get some armor strip because you can't use your first two abilities. It works, but you'll definitely do a lot more if you utilize him as a weapon platform. So both frames have strength and weaknesses, some more than the other, but both fulfill a role and function that boils down to something similar. And who you pick will also depend on how you play and how you aim to play. Of course, there are people who will look at both of these frames and not see the appeal at all. which is absolutely fair, but that's what you get when you want to enjoy the game your own way. Anyway, folks, that has been it from me. I do hope you enjoyed and learned something from this video. And if you did, please feel free to leave a like, share, and subscribe. For more Warframe content, streams, and so much more, do refer to the description. Thanks for watching, and as always, a peace. Bye-bye now.